Welcome to No Apologies. I'm Dana Lash. So today let's open by taking a break from the insanity, the headlines, and just give a perspective on where we're at in the country. I mean, we can sit here and discuss like the media whining because they didn't get questions answered when they at the Boris Johnson, Joe Biden presser. I mean, you guys promoted that. We could discuss the latest disaster caused by the administration. What disaster is it today? Because multiple ones happen every week. We could talk about the tyranny that's being imposed on all Western nations and the world by government because the virus that has a 99% plus survivability rate. All of these things are happening. We could discuss it and we'll continue to, but I don't care. I just don't care. Really, honestly, I just don't. So I think it's fair to say that it's halftime in what is, I think, maybe the biggest fight for freedom in America since maybe perhaps the Civil War. This isn't hyperbole. If you can't see what's happening in the country, where are you here? Hi, are you with us? Borders are apparently dissolved, at least the southern border. Trust in institutions is flatlined. Media no longer is interested in informing, and they're not the watchdog for you, but for government. Our big tech, they label any tweet, any post, any video with which they disagree. They smack it with a warning label. They call it misinformation or disinformation if they don't take it down completely and suspend your account. Who decides if it's misinformation? Some government agency probably, or some intern that increasingly controls big tech. You're now asked to take an injection against your will, or you could potentially lose your livelihood. And one party, you know who this is, has decided that it doesn't believe any longer in democracy in our republic or the legislative process at all, and they want to rule by fiat. So using government agencies like the CDC to circumvent the Constitution, like your right to gather wherever you want without a mask, or your right to ask for your rent check from your tenant. This seems to be the norm. America's allies feel betrayed. The French just pulled their ambassador from America. Israel is pondering doing the same thing. Our allies all watched our humiliating Afghanistan exit and have rightly determined that America can't be counted on. And the Democrat Party is entirely captured by corporate interests and Marxists. And corporations are entirely captured by Marxists. These two powerful forces work all in lockstep now. It's like the Death Star. And all corporate policy is now essentially defined by the Democrat platform. So I could say, it does seem like it happened quickly, but the pieces for this they've been putting this together for quite a long time. But we are kind of in this quasi-statist government. So statism, obviously, the belief that the government is the ultimate authority on earth, and as such, the source of law, morality, and righteousness is the belief that government determines what is right and wrong. Statism is entirely antithetical to individual liberty, individualism, the principle that America was built on. Do you want to be free? Yes, no, circle one. This is why right now you're probably feeling the crushing weight to eliminate all individuality. No more individual opinion, speech, and indeed all rights. You can't even control pronoun usage anymore. It's insane. Statists want you to trade your individuality in for collectivism and your freedom. Another word for this is Marxism. We just need to call it what it is. This failed ideology can I just rail for a moment on Marxism? Marxism was created by an obese, slovenly, smelly man who is said to have horrible personal hygiene habits, who is a horrible husband, a horrible father, who never ever worked in the private sector. He never actually had a real job or earned $1 a day in his life. Instead, he grifted off of everyone that he knew. His own mother said, I wish that he actually made capital for as much as he discusses it. You should actually read about what she said about her son. And his idiotic ideology has done more to kill more people on earth than any other ideology in human history. And he was also a big giant racist and an anti-Semite. So that should also be added. It's a form of identity-based Marxism now that's overtaken the country, and it's happening at blinding speed. Now, after what I just said, with everything, you're probably wondering what can stop this from happening? Because it seems, and it's supposed to seem overwhelming. So what can stop it? The very thing that our country was founded on, individualism, like you, right? For the longest time, we had it real good in America. There were always other men and women, other people who were willing to put themselves on the line to preserve the greatest country that's ever existed. And most of us really never had to like really put a lot of skin in the game, right? I think we've coasted on the fumes of our forefathers for a long time. And our forefathers understood that tyranny is always at the door, and they did everything in their power to create a resilient republic with multiple safeguards against tyranny. But they also knew that it would take something very important to hold on to that republic, and that is you. But for far too long, we've been content to be entertained to death. We're all guilty of it. We like our stuff. We like our little luxuries. We like our vacations. Even if you're poor, you're wealthy compared to the majority of the world. Poor in America. And I grew up poor in America, so I know a little bit about that. We want everyone to think well of us. We want the approval of our peers. We've gotten lazy and entitled when it comes to freedom. And we tell ourselves somebody else is going to speak up. Someone else will fight for it. Someone else will die for it, but not us. There's too much to lose. I might lose my status or money or job, and I get that, right? I might lose my friends or my standing in the community. I understand that, believe me. But like I said, it's halftime in the contest for this nation's soul. And the question is, are we all willing to get on the field? Because I don't think so. About 5 years ago, a wealthy real estate magnate came down an elevator and threw his hat in the ring for the presidency. And the world laughed. They thought it was a joke. They liked him up until this point. Oh, he can't be serious, they thought. But he was. Turns out he was. And for all of his flaws, he had something that we hadn't seen in a politician on the right for a very long time. He had fight. And while Trump may not have always articulated the why behind his beliefs like an Ivy League scholar, mean tweets and all, he most definitely had strong ones. And he had convictions. And his convictions were strong enough to not be overturned. He was the quintessential individualist, and that's why the statists had to crush him. He inspired individualism in other people. So love him or hate him, about half of the country appreciated that rugged individualism and that willingness to fight for America. And people really enjoyed watching Trump throw punches at the propaganda press and our corrupt ruling class. But maybe we all enjoyed it a little too much. Maybe people thought that he could fight all of the battles when he was just one dude. And just like before, maybe a lot thought we could sit back and just enjoy our freedoms in America while this feisty and rough around the edges president did all our fighting for us. But see, here's the deal. He couldn't fight this battle for you entirely on his own. No one can, and that's obvious by now. The war for America's soul is playing out in every state and every city and every town across America. So what Trump did accomplish for, all of his mean tweets was to show every last free-thinking individualist who loves being free, who loves liberty, that you have to get in the fight. And if you walk on the battlefield of ideas, guess what? You got to be willing to take and throw a punch. Politically speaking, all of you violent leftists who are so eager to find violence and everything else, they're going to call you horrible names. It will cost you something, I promise you. Just like it cost our founders something. When they signed that Declaration of Independence, they were basically signing their own death warrant, and they knew. I mean, you had people who lost their livelihoods, who lost family members. A lot of people don't have to make that kind of sacrifice to that extent, but still the question remains, what are you willing to risk to save this country? Or are you hoping that everybody else risks something for you? The other side, the status woke, they never sleep. They're tireless. They're full of rage. They run 24/7 on rage, endless rage. And their people are less interested, it seems, in attending rallies, but they are more interested in beating the pavement, pushing that ball down the field any way they can. They don't go to rallies because they want to spend their energy going door to door and phone banking. And they want to win the battle for America very badly. So they have been very busy in taking over every city council, every school board, every government agency. They're all in, and they want total victory and annihilation of their opponent. And the goal, destruction of individualism. Really taking down America itself. That's what CRT is all about. All traded for statism and collectivism, in which your individuality and rights will be crushed out of existence. All exchanged for identity politics and a tyrannical government that determines, based on things like skin color, who wins and loses. All in the name of our new Marxist value, equity. And if you think the statists and their ambition to bring heaven down to earth are ruthless now, wait until they have complete and total power over you. See, the thing is, this fight is coming to your doorstep, whether you like it or not. Doesn't matter if you're in the political sphere anymore. When our current president mandated that you got to put a needle in your arm, have to have an injection that still we'd have no long-term data on, one that actually isn't stopping the spread of infection, and that then they told you that if you didn't take it, then you could potentially lose your livelihood. Well, that's a glimpse on how it's going to go from here, right? I mean, think about this. If you're going to mandate that people inject something in their arm, shouldn't it work like an inoculation in the way that it was presented when you first mandated that people needed to be injected? There's no escaping it. Tyranny of the state's coming to your household. You can't run from it even if you tried. I understand that we always could before, right? The statist left used to tolerate us, but now they're not just interested in winning. I wrote a whole book on Grace Canceled about how redemption's gone. It's not about winning, it's about destruction. It's not about persuading people, it's about destroying opposition. So what are you gonna do? Because Trump can't fight every battle, and honestly, he needs people to fight for him too. Brave governors like Ron DeSantis can't do it by themselves, they have to have help. And you can't outsource your civic duty to the pundits and political commentators, like me, even. Republicans either can't or won't save us either. But there's still someone who can, and that someone's you. I don't care how much time you think that you don't have. Everybody's got time. Everybody has either time or money. That's usually what it is, right? Now, I'm convinced that we're still the majority. It doesn't feel like it, though. And that's what they want you to feel. So it's time for everybody to walk into the lion's den. And when you do, I promise they're going to try to make you feel outgunned, outnumbered, totally surrounded and alone. And you might even feel that way because that's exactly how they want you to feel. That's how I would want my opponent to feel. All you have is your convictions. All you have is your faith. The outcome of the fight, of this one at least, isn't assured. And it wasn't for our founders either. I understand that people are nervous about it. People are scared. People don't want a rage mob to come at them in their own community. It used to never be like this. You could live your life, have your opinion, and you never had to worry about losing friends. But now everything is so politically tribal, which I also wrote about in my last book. But here's the thing, whether you like it or not, you have to get involved. Especially, for instance, you parents, like with the CRT battles. I'm going to tell you something. If you can't be prevailed upon to show up at school board meetings at least once every now and then and fight for your kids, maybe you should rethink having children. That's a part of parenthood too. You can't outsource everything to everybody else, whether it's activism or fighting for your kids. Now, everything is at stake. I wanted to end on this very simple but powerful meme that's traveling around the internet. It's kind of germane, but in it, a man pulls out a whip and he confronts a crowd. This is what tyranny is, the imposition of government force by the few over the many, backed up by physical threat or fear of being targeted and canceled. In the next image, we see the entire crowd bow except for one brave soul who finds the courage to stand up at the risk of being whipped. Not like not like with horse reins, but with real whips. This person knows by standing up that it will cost them, but there's some kind of conviction inside them that drives them to stand up anyway. And in the next image, something very unexpected happens. Emboldened by that one defiant individualist, more are willing to stand up and face down tyranny until finally that tyrannical statist with the whip, they bow to the people. Just as fear is contagious, so is courage. So it's halftime in this contest for America. The outcome isn't assured, it comes down to you. Now, if you're going to win, everybody's got to get into the game. You can't outsource it to someone else. I always said, never, ever, ever be content to warm your hands by the fire of another patriot. Be the brave one, because people are watching you. Your kids are watching you. Your grandkids are watching you. Your neighbors are watching you. And you will embolden others. And your opposition isn't as powerful as they want you to think. And remember, a fight that's based on lies and hatred, that can only go so long and can only convince so many people. Truth always wins. And if you can't sell truth, as a friend of mine said, then you suck and you need to go refine your message. And that goes for a lot of you Republicans out there, right? Everybody has to be willing to stand up for that republic now, because that is the only way you keep it. So coming up, we tackle the fight for free speech and education. Apparently now you can't misgender or use certain pronouns in some of these universities. This is insane. Robert Shibley with the Foundation for Individual Rights and Education joins us next to discuss. Stay with us. Black Rifle Coffee Company is a veteran-owned coffee company serving premium coffee to people who love America. And they develop their explosive roast profiles with the same mission focus that they've learned while serving our great nation. And with every purchase you make, Black Rifle Coffee gives back. So in 2020, they donated over 6 million cups of coffee to veteran, law enforcement, and first responder causes. Their high-quality coffee beans are imported all the way from Colombia and Brazil, then carefully roasted at their facilities in Tennessee and Utah. And you can even get a signature roast called Lava Panther, sourced from a small farm in Guatemala. So the temperatures are not cooling off. It's the same thing every time. Temperature's not. It's still hot in Texas. So you can go. Best way to fuel the rest of your whatever, I guess start of autumn, is with Black Rifle Coffee. The best way to do it is the Black Rifle Coffee Club. And when you join, your chosen brews, roasted package, shipped right to your door. You can get special discounts and all kinds of stuff. Visit blackriflecoffee.com/Dana. Use code Dana at checkout for 20% off your purchase and your first coffee club order. Free speech in higher education is in retreat, it seems. It's higher education, right? That's so bizarre. But thankfully not everywhere. So how do colleges stack up in regards to free speech? And I'm more interested in this Point Park story. This is crazy. Robert Shibley is the executive director for the Foundation for Individual Rights in Education. He joins me now to discuss this. Robert, thanks so much for being here. So I've got to because this story, I was looking at this earlier today. This is not the most, probably the most sophisticated way to describe this, but it's the dumbest thing that I've ever seen in quite some time. And we are in a dumb era, so there's plenty. So Point Park University in Pittsburgh, they're threatening students who do not use certain pronouns or who misgender, which is apparently now a word. Campus Reform wrote about this. They have their school's Office of Equity and Inclusion, and they said that any student, any individual who's been informed of another person's gender identity, pronouns, etc., they have to respect that individual, and that misgendering, that's basically now like a punishable offense. And what gets me, Robert, about all of this is, if we're going to have a discussion about respect, then why is it's always one person whose rights and respect for that individual that's promoted at the expense of all others, including non-persons like science? I wanted to get your thoughts on this.
Yeah, I think it's because, a lot of times, because of the polarization that we see, the rights are set against each other in a way that they don't need to be. And I think we do see that in a lot of different areas. People are more interested in trying to require people to say or believe things that they're interested in rather than convince them, which is harder work. And so it's understandable that people want to take the shortcut to force other people either to believe or say what they say, or at least pretend that they're going along with it. But it doesn't accomplish the actual goal, and I think it is very divisive. It's setting people against one another in so many different ways, and I think this is another example of that. A lot of people simply, don't want to use alternative pronouns. They may have religious objections or, other ideological objections. They may make a mistake. And actually, the email they sent out said that intent doesn't really matter here. It's the impact. So, even if you didn't mean to misgender somebody or made that kind of mistake, they say that doesn't necessarily get you out of it. And I think applying that standard to people is so unjust in a situation like this, where you have something this is a pretty new phenomenon, that it really is a recipe for sort of social disaster.
No, it is. And you bring up, Robert, a really good point. I mean, it's a new phenomenon, but it seems like every single thing, a lot of these policy issues that we're dealing with culturally that end up becoming policy, they start new, but then it's just they keep at it, and the fight continues until it becomes fait accompli, and then now it's an actual regulation. But what gets me, and going through the perspective of free speech about this too, I understand that there's this promotion of protected classes, which is a whole other issue. But to curb speech through the filter of protected classes, that's kind of a new approach to this. I don't know if that's one that sticks or not. And I wanted to get your thought, my non-lawyerly, non-looking at the case law on this and the past administration on it. But it is a new approach, and I'm just wondering how much more successful they're going to be at getting something like that to stick.
Well, I think what we're seeing is the idea of hostile environment harassment, which is the only kind of harassment that's based on a protected class, like you mentioned, sex, race, etc., being something that doesn't necessarily have to be intended, can just sort of arise as part of the environment. The idea, when that was originally conceived of by courts, it was a pretty high bar to that kind of thing. But universities, and unfortunately at the impetus of the Department of Education, high schools as well, but most prominently universities, sort of defined that down so far that you start to get to the point where they feel comfortable sending out policy statements or whatever you would call this, they've been a little bit coy about to what extent this is actually required and what they mean by it, which is also part of the chilling effect and the fear, right? Because you never know whether you're going to step in it. But the idea that we've gotten it to the point where it can actually be prohibited harassment under federal law by saying a single word to somebody is never how that was intended. And it's not something that the First Amendment can really contemplate. And certainly I don't think a free society can contemplate it.
Yeah, I don't know. It's just it's in a bizarre land now. I just can't believe that we're having this like push and pull over pronouns or push and pull over what is or isn't science, which brings me, you guys had this up on thefire.org. University of San Diego law school professor was investigated for, you're smiling like I know this one, investigated for a post about coronavirus. Because apparently some students complained he had stated something, and this had to do with lab leak. I remember, and I graduated in 96, I graduated in high school in 96, and I remember going to college, and that's where all questions could be asked, nothing was on the table, everything could be discussed. Now it is the place where you can't even have a conversation about lab leak, or a professor can't even write it and post about it without a student snitching on them. And snitching when I was in college was bad. Now apparently it's the new thing. Now everybody's a snitch, and so he gets told on, and then they get penalized for this. I just don't think that colleges are the place. I mean, really, it's the opposite of really academic curiosity anymore. What are your thoughts on this particular story too? Because I can't believe that the university was like, well, we're going to review his post. I mean, it was something that the President of the United States has even discussed too, Robert.
Yeah, I think that actually is a great thing to highlight. This professor, Thomas Smith, who had used maybe unfortunate language in some ways to describe the fact that he thought that the Chinese government and Communist Party's story behind the coronavirus was bunk. But yeah, this was around March of this year, and if I'm sure a lot of people remember that at that time people were being deplatformed on social media. There was a lot of pushback against the idea that the coronavirus, COVID-19 virus, could have come from a lab leak. And that didn't reverse until about May, when the Wall Street Journal revealed that there was U.S. intelligence suggesting, okay, maybe that was the reason. And almost all of society now like turned on a dime, and all of a sudden it was okay to talk about this kind of thing. And that was because all of a sudden they can no longer keep up this idea that the people in charge knew exactly what it was okay to say and what wasn't, and that they were always correct. That I was hoping in a lot of ways that would sort of blow up this idea of inevitability, of infallibility on both part of the people who are making those decisions and the people who listen. But unfortunately, it doesn't really seem to have abated. But it's important to remember, like, this person was persecuted for this in that cultural moment. And that's why free speech is important. It's to protect people when people are, people with dissenting opinions, when the pressure to do it is at its most intense. Otherwise, there's no point in having free speech protections.
Yeah, that's a really great point. It was never actually meant to just protect the thing that everybody agrees with. I mean, sometimes it's to protect things that are controversial and things that maybe you don't agree with, but which seems, I guess now to some folks today, it seems antithetical. I don't know. It's bizarre. Let me ask you this last question for you, Robert. I appreciate your time with us today. So a lot of parents, because there's been a lot of discussion about now, honestly, just how worthwhile is college education anymore, especially with the cost of college. And of course, we have Congress to thank for completely just federalizing student loans and driving up the cost of college, et cetera, et cetera. But a lot of parents are like, my kids aren't really getting the education that we thought they were going to get, like an actual education, like the kind we got back in the, quote unquote, the day. So now parents are kind of wondering, is it even really worth it? And it seems now it's almost kind of a cultural threshold that you kind of walk through. Make your connections, have your associations. Trade schools have always been, kind of thrown to the wayside, technical schools. But now it's like everybody's reevaluating that. And I wanted to ask your thoughts on that, and especially in this environment where it seems like a true pursuit of academic curiosity is very, very strongly discouraged.
Yeah, and that's why FIRE just this week came out with these rankings of 154 of the biggest and most prestigious schools. Most likely, many thousands of people went there or go there now, so that people can make those kind of decisions. There is a real difference between like our number 1 and 2 are Claremont McKenna and University of Chicago, the latter of which is pretty famous for standing up for free speech, and the 2 bottom, which is Marquette and DePauw. And at both of those places,
Wow.
that culture really makes a difference, because what I thought was really interesting is at DePauw, which is the last one, the tolerance for liberal speakers and conservative speakers was both lower than average. So it wasn't, at most colleges, if you had more liberals, they would be more tolerant of liberal speakers. If you have more conservatives, the opposite. And toward the bottom, people don't want to hear any kind of opinions on either side, regardless of what the student body actually believes. And so there really is, I have to imagine on these campuses, and we're going to do more research to find out, sort of an oppressive feeling that nobody wants to talk about anything. They don't think the university has their back if they do. And that extends to faculty, it extends to students. And you're right, you don't get the quality of education that maybe you and I did back in the day. I can tell you that just visiting campuses, it is markedly different, the environment, what students will tell you they can talk about. And it's very sad. And there is no excuse for it. There's no justification, especially with the prices.
Yeah, it's like a real life version of PCU, that movie with Jeremy Piven. I'm sure
right.
that he's like, I know exactly where the chant was. We're not going to protest. We're not going to. I feel we are all. That came true. All of our past movies are coming true now, Robert. It's crazy. It's good to see you, Robert Shibley with FIRE, thefire.org. Make sure you go and check out the speech rankings as well on these college websites, or for all of these colleges. Robert, thanks so much for your time. I appreciate you.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. All right, folks, coming up, why do we keep hanging out allies to dry? I mean, if it's not Afghanistan, then it's not talking to France at all about undercutting them with any kind of submarine propulsion, nuclear propulsion technology for submarines. Now the squad just helped to cut funding for our biggest ally in the Middle East, the Iron Dome funding for Israel, weeks after we left our friends in Afghanistan to fight for their lives. This is crazy. I mean, what is the point at this point of the what's the Biden foreign policy edict? What is it? We're going to talk with Congressman Brian Mast about this next. Stay with us. How much equity do you have in your home? Cybercrime experts are alerting homeowners that the more equity they have, the greater the chance that criminals could target them. Home title theft is one of the fastest growing crimes, and Home Title Lock, America's leader in home title protection, is warning homeowners that they could potentially be victims and not know it. Cyber thieves can search hundreds of public databases for high equity homes. They can find your home's online title, forge your signature stating that you sold your home, and then take out loans with your equity. Insurance or common identity theft programs will not cover you. Protect your most valuable asset and register your address to see if you could potentially be a victim, and receive a complete title history of your home, a $100 value, for free. Visit HometitleLock.com. Well, the squad got their way, and they were able to get funding for the Iron Dome in Israel axed. This is crazy. I mean, at a time like now, right? Israel is not very happy about this. And those thousands of Haitians in border camps, apparently not all, and by not all, I mean not even the majority, are headed back to Haiti. Many of them are going to stay right in the U.S. There were buses dropping people off all the way even near McAllen, Texas. Crazy. Joining us now, Florida Congressman Brian Mast on all of this. Congressman, as always, very good to see you. Thank you so much for joining me on this and so many other issues. This is such an insane time. So I'll start with the Iron Dome stuff first, because I feel, we were talking about this a little bit earlier. I don't know what this administration's approaches to allies or maintaining good foreign policy relationships, keeping allies happy, whether it's kind of excluding France from any kind of discussions related to AUKUS, whether it's allowing the squad, the people who are on Instagram and act like influencers more than they do members of Congress, and not sponsoring any kind of bills or really representing their folks. They're now treating Israel the way that they are, or one ally, especially now with Afghanistan. It's kind of a mess, and I wanted to get your take on all of this, because I do not envy you your job at all.
No, I mean, you kind of said it the right way. It's forsaking your friends, people that have actually shown in tough times that they are your friends, in an aim to do what? Funnel arms and dollars to people that are terrorists and not your friends. And let's not just talk about this at 30,000 feet. Taking away the option of Iron Dome, probably the greatest humanitarian effort that the United States of America has ever partnered on. I mean, we literally save tens of thousands of lives pretty much every year as Israel's being attacked by Hamas terrorists. That what does the left also want to do? They want to make those terrorists their own country so they could also have their own seat at the UN, also forsaking our friends. It's very akin to leaving weapons for the Taliban, which will now also probably get a seat at the UN, or supporting Iran by the Iran nuclear deal. You see this tone that they're going on again and again and again of forsaking our friends and funneling dollars to terrorists.
Yeah, it doesn't seem, I mean, when I look at, and actually I was listening to Jen Psaki's presser a little bit earlier today, it also seems that I don't think Biden's in charge of this foreign policy. I'm not going to play armchair, doctor or psychologist with him, but it seems, what I mean by this is it's usually administrations, they have a very cohesive strategy when dealing with foreign policy and dealing with different allies. And the only common denominator that I can see with this administration is whatever puts the United States in the most disadvantageous position, that's usually the one that they're going to go with. That's the only cohesion that I can see in all of this. And I kind of wanted to get your thoughts on this because I don't know who's driving this bus.
No, it's sad but true, like the song says. But I think the policy driver is this. It's the prevailing breeze. President Biden is a windsock for the prevailing left breeze. And wherever that wind is blowing strongest, because that's what the progressives are out there yelling about. We don't like Israel, or we don't like this, or we don't like that. That's what the administration is caving to, and caving to immediately. Not any kind of fight that they put up. Oh, okay. Yeah, listen, our greatest friend and ally in the region, we'll just roll over on that. America being invaded, our border patrol having to back off of American soil, not even allowed to defend their own land. Okay, we'll just cave to that. Not giving any border patrol agents any overtime pay or anything like that. Not letting them have the resources, chastising them for being on horseback and trying to keep people from illegally entering our country. Yeah, we'll get on board with saying they were probably in the wrong for doing that. That is what they were doing on every single front.
Yeah, and you, of course, obviously talking about the border and all the images that we saw from the Del Rio sector. It was crazy. We were hearing yesterday that, the administration is going to be sending back a number of these Haitians, repatriating them, sending them back to Haiti. There was one plane that we know of that did land in Port-au-Prince, and apparently the pilots were attacked, and some of the people who were working the plane were beaten up. Someone was bitten. I saw some video. But by and large, apparently people have just been dropped off. They've been loaded onto buses, and it's a great optic for the press that's now all there, finally at the border. Everybody, I guess, got jealous of Bill Melugin and the coverage that he was getting. So now all the press shows up and they load people on the buses, and it looks like the buses are driving off to take people, I guess, to go back to, there's so many questions here. I guess they think that they're going to take them to the airport, flying back to Haiti, but instead what we've been learning is that they've dropped a number off in the Rio Grande Valley sector. They've dropped other people off. I mean, they've taken them from Del Rio, yes, but they've taken them to other parts of Texas, and then they get on other transportation and then go throughout the country. That's kind of a problem, especially, Congressman. We're told we're in a pandemic. If you want to come back into the country, you have to show your vax pass or show proof of a negative test or something. But if you were to just, kind of skip on over the dam down there in Del Rio, all's well and good.
Yeah, listen, if you helped America, you're definitely not going to have a good option to get in here through, say, an SIV applicant program. But if you want to come squat in America, hey, just come on over the border illegally and find a place to go squat. And by the way, you'll probably also get a lot of free taxpayer-funded medical care, free for you, not free for the taxpayer. They'll pick up the price for it. A bus ticket, a plane ticket, an allowance for you to go somewhere else, or at minimum, we're going to have to pay the cost for you to go all the way back to Haiti. But think about how much of an invitation President Biden really had to create for people to come into America legally for Haitians that are right off the Florida shore, right? I mean, in Florida, we're used to them trying to come over by boat, those from Cuba, those from Haiti, those from other places. They're going all the way over through South Central America, in some cases coming through Brazil, Colombia, other places, you name it, all the way up through there, because the cartels will take them through that. They'll pay the cartels instead of just crossing the water into Florida. That's how much of an invitation there is on our southern border, that they're making that entire trek across South Central in order to get into America. That's how open it is.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. The number that apparently was under the bridge the other day, 14,800, there are towns in Texas that aren't even that big. I know there's towns in Florida that aren't even that size, 14,800 people. And I think of that group, only 500 were actually deported.
Yeah, we're told that the number actually is somewhere closer to 20,000. Mayorkas was on the Hill today, didn't tender a resignation that I know of to this point for what he doesn't believe is an absolute abysmal failure. I don't know how he doesn't see this as an abysmal failure. I think that probably Harris is going to try to find some more tax dollars to give away, and we know this for a fact. We're also on the Hill right now working on the National Defense Authorization Act and other pieces of legislation that literally have dollars in them to move towards amnesty, to move towards green cards for those coming into the country illegally through reconciliation and these other things that are going through the Hill process this week. So it's not surprising whatsoever. And it shouldn't be surprising to anybody that pays attention to politics after what you've seen with DC statehood and changing voting laws and a number of different efforts, that probably sometime between now and November of 2022, you will see a massive effort to do a massive amnesty program for all of these folks that they are letting in illegally, not just Haitians, but those coming in from across South Central.
Oh, Congressman, and it makes your heart sink too when you consider that less was done for Afghan SAVs, these individuals that actually went with our military. And as you know, they were interpreters, translators. If they're not getting droned, apparently they're just getting abandoned and left in Kabul. But yet we can move so quickly and so swiftly in getting planes to send some Haitians back or to put amnesty money and make sure that people who cross illegally, that they can stay here in the United States and everything's taken care of. Not our priorities, the administration's priorities, Congressman. We appreciate what you do in DC. Thank you so much for joining us, and God bless.
God bless. Wish you the best.
Thank you. All right, folks, coming up, wait until you see this very awkward moment that the president's team, this was so awkward. He was having a press conference with British Prime Minister Boris Johnson. And Boris Johnson was answering some of the questions from the press, and then it went kind of off the rails from there. Wait until you see this. Stay with us. So for the second time, it appears that our Commander-in-Chief fell asleep in front of a foreign dignitary. So the first time that it appeared to happen, he was completely non-aware with the Israeli Prime Minister. So it's still not cute or at all. Maybe he's just he's praying. We'll just say that. But he is the president, and he's been a human wrecking ball thus far. So the fact that he looks like he's falling asleep just adds to the sense that no one's actually driving this bus. So it certainly doesn't feel like Biden is. So benefit of the doubt. Maybe he was just, I don't know, maybe he was saying have a little moment of silence, or maybe he did doze off for like a split second. Nothing that doesn't happen to anybody else, I guess. So anyway, unfortunately, so this is what happened with this earlier today with this press conference with Boris Johnson, and what I don't know. I don't know what was happening with this. They were taking questions, and apparently the reaction that Biden's handlers had to the press when the press thought they could ask questions. I'm going to show you this video here in a second, but Boris Johnson was answering questions from the press, and then Biden's handlers shoved him off. First, watch this one. This is the handlers and shutting down the whole question and answer session. Watch this.
On balance is the Belfast Good Friday Accords. That's the Belfast Good Friday Agreement. That's the. I think
It sounded like a bunch of preschool moms trying to get their kid out the door, right? All their kids at the door. Why did Biden's staff cut off Bojo in mid-sentence? Thank you, okay, that's enough, thank you. And then all the press had to go outside. And then they were filing complaints, which we're gonna talk about. So I wanted to show you this video because this was Jen Psaki's reaction to, she was asked about this during Ducey time today. She was asked about this, and this was her response as to why the handlers were not allowing any kind of questions to be asked of President Joe Biden. Watch this.
Well, I think in that circumstance, and I think our relationship with the United Kingdom and with Prime Minister Johnson is so strong and abiding, we will be able to move forward beyond this. But he called on individuals from his press corps without alerting us to that intention in advance.
So maybe the reason is because Biden's a major risk anytime he gets in front of a camera. I mean, clearly his people know this, but this is not normal. It is not normal. And I don't buy the fact. So Boris Johnson can answer questions, but Joe Biden can't. I mean, it just looks bad. It looks bad. So the press actually went through the White House Press Correspondents Association. They went and they actually filed a complaint with Jen Psaki because they did not like the fact that his handlers were running interference. CBS News reporter and White House correspondent Steve Portnoy, he complained on Twitter saying, quote, "In the president's Oval Office, Boris Johnson recognized 2 British reporters for questions. Joe Biden then signaled it was time for the press to leave without taking any questions from his own press corps," end quote. Wah. So honestly, I really don't feel bad for the press because they don't like it when they don't feel important. And they kind of made themselves that way. The administration sees them as nothing more than lackeys that carry their water. You're on a kind of a need-to-know basis. They don't respect the media's sycophants. They don't respect it. And honestly, they write puff pieces about the Biden administration. They run cover for them as it relates to Hunter Biden and any number of scandals. I mean, this is the same press that was persecuted under Obama Biden when they were actually trying to use the Espionage Act, bizarrely, some anachronistic application to go after reporters whose reporting they didn't like. People like James Rosen. They were getting wiretaps on Associated Press reporters. They actively persecuted our press. But did you hear any cries of, all hail our free press, protect our free press then? And that same free press ran defense for this president who can't even be trusted to stay awake during a meeting with foreign leaders. And apparently can't even be trusted to answer a question. There's a new poll from Rasmussen that indicates Americans have no faith in the commander-in-chief as a result of all of this. A new survey shows that 39% of respondents thought that Biden was just doing the job of the president, while 51% said that others are making decisions for him, and 10% said they're not sure. I'm not sure we need a poll to confirm this, but there it is. So let's hope for our sake and that of our president and this administration and the world that he wakes up soon and we wake up from this national nightmare. That does it for us tonight. Thanks for tuning in. Good night and don't bend the knee.